Good evening and welcome. You're watching The Left, Right and Centre with me, Sanket Upadhyay. Yes, the virus is still out there, strong and invisible. And yes, no matter what else is happening in this country, a discourse around COVID-19 is absolutely essential. A crucial decision was taken by an arm of the government, further expanding the scope of the already circulated vaccines, upgrading their status. So the big question is, and there are many questions that emanate out of this, over-the-counter vaccines, will the wait end soon? Wait for everyone. Will these vaccines now be more than readily available in large quantities now that they've got this much needed upgrade? You see, there are a number of important questions that we'll bring out through the course of this discussion and pick the brains of the top scientists as well as doctors who are going to join us in just a short moment from now. Let's take a look at them one by one. So what exactly has happened? Let's put up that graphic on the screen right now. It's the CDSCO, the Subject Expert Committee of the agency that clears vaccines, has recommended for upgrade of Covishield and Covaxin status from restricted use in emergency situations to grant of new drug permission with conditions. In adult population, the Drug Controller General of India, the DCGI, will evaluate the recommendations and give its decision. Now, is this a boost to India's COVID fight? What could possibly happen? Market use authorization for Covaxin and Covishield is possible soon. A final decision on market use will be taken by Drug Controller General, the DCGI, the nodal agency. Boosters could then be available for purchase on a doctor's prescription in a pharmacy near you. Hospitals and clinics will be empowered to prescribe these booster doses. Boosters could be given at CoWIN registered hospitals and clinics. Subject Expert Committee will put conditions on the market use authorization. How exactly should these vaccines be available so that there is no wrong use? For instance, a person should not end up getting many doses just because somebody wants. You know, the other side of vaccine hesitancy. Vaccine mixing for booster doses, as of this moment, we are being told is unlikely. There is no information so far on the reduction in booster dose gap from 9 months. So that's the status as of this moment. The reason why this is extremely important discourse is because this potentially saves us from future waves. If vaccine is a tool and if it is going to be available soon over the counter, it could help us in fighting COVID and prevent people from landing up in hospitals. Let's welcome our guest, Dr. Ashok Seth, Chairman of the Fortis Escorts Heart Institute, Viren Shetty, Chief Operating Officer of Narayana Health, Dr. Sudarshan Balal, Chairman of the Manipal Hospitals and also member of the Karnataka COVID Task Force, and Dr. Manish Gupta, Medical Director at LH Hiranandani Hospital in Mumbai. Thank you very much. Dr. Seth, let me begin with you first. This is definitely good news. The fact that these vaccines and their status has been upgraded is good news. But for it to be easily available, far more easily than it already is, what needs to be done and how important is this?
This is extremely important. Let me just start off by saying that we must compliment the government for an immaculate roadmap for vaccination in this country, something which was seemingly impossible, and the biggest program of vaccination in the world, which the government has made it happen. And now we're towards clearly the end of the primary vaccination program, with close to 72% of the adult population vaccinated and nearly 160 crore doses being given. So as a sequence, one, we understand that our vaccinations are safe, and we have an experience to understand that they're effective. The second important aspect which has happened now is that boosters are important and are going to protect us against this wave as well as further waves. And finally, there's enough vaccine dosage now available to us, clearly. With these three things in mind, the normal sequence of events is that boosters should become more easily available to the larger population of people who have not yet been boosted. And perhaps the dosing should come from 9 to 6 months. So how do we make that happen? So the expert committee has given its recommendations, but there is far more to that recommendation than just meets the eye. For example, if it has to come from 9 to 6 months and to be available in a reasonable manner, and still in a safe manner, but in an unconditional, in some form of a conditional manner, then the logistics of boosting is a huge logistics, both financially as well as in mechanistic terms. It has to go downstream to smaller hospitals, to even private practitioners being able to give booster doses to a larger population of people. It's not going to happen through a present infrastructure because it's absolutely giving again a dose to the whole population itself. Secondly, financially, the government has done a great job to either give free vaccinations or highly subsidized vaccination to the whole of this country. But it cannot continue to do that indefinitely. And here's the opportunity whereby those who cannot afford it would continue to actually have it from the government. But those who can afford it, and even companies with corporate social responsibilities, could buy the vaccine and give it to a larger population of people to protect them from future waves. And finally, let's not forget the fairness to everyone, and that is to the manufacturers themselves, who've really done a great job nationally as well as socially to create these vaccines and sell them at a highly subsidized cost till the whole country nearly got vaccinated. And this is the time for them to at least make some profits, which they can put back in research. And we need the next generation of vaccines now, and they'll be able to bring that. So I think it's a great natural sequence of events. That's how vaccines grow and become available and go downstream to the whole population. It's actually like having a vaccination being given at your doorstep by your own GP on a prescription, abiding by the rules of the government.
Correct. And we are inching closer to that situation. Okay, Dr. Balal, I want to come to you now. What should one make of the vaccination drive itself? For a common man, does this mean that vaccines are here to stay? This is going to be an annual booster event, or once every a few months, something which will become so accessible and so normalized and so streamlined and institutionalized that it'll no more be a huge activity or an event that, oh, I'm about to go and get a booster. Then it'll become a part of normal practice. Is that what we are heading towards?
Good evening, Sanket, and all the other eminent panelists. Thank you for having me here. I think it's a phenomenal move by the government of providing free vaccines for 160 crore plus jabs and now offering the precautionary dose too. I do agree that some more availability of vaccine in the private sector for boosters to be given in the private sector should go parallel with the free vaccination done by the government. But I do believe that this vaccination will be a ritual and will be added to our immunization card like many of the other vaccines that we take, maybe the flu vaccine, the pneumococcus, the oral polio, MMR in children, so on and so forth. So I do believe that this will be a long-term thing that will stay with us. How the government deals with this on an annual basis or whatever the recommendation comes from the experts is something we need to see. But certainly, I think the story of the vaccines have changed since it was first brought in last year or earlier this year, which is it has changed from disease prevention to disease modulation. We now know that it doesn't necessarily prevent disease, but certainly mitigates the severity of the disease and certainly ICU stays and mortality. And that's the take-home lesson for us. The vaccination is needed, including the booster, to reduce the severity of the disease and reduce the mortality, even though it may not necessarily prevent the disease in every instance.
Okay. Mr. Shetty, I wanted to come to you and ask you a question on logistics. For this vaccine to be made available in every corner of this country, everywhere, I think that's the ultimate idea, right? So logistics are involved. Right now, over the past 1 year, what has happened is that all these things have been very tightly controlled with government intervention, and rightfully so, because we were starting an inoculation exercise. But once there is liberalization of this entire exercise, what are the challenges that one can face? See, in cities it may not be a problem, but what about the back of beyond?
So you'd first have to understand why the entire procurement was done through a central purchasing arm. You have the live example in the US where every state was allowed to procure their own vaccines. So what happened was that richer states like California, New York, they started buying up many more doses than they required and blocking up capacity, whereas poorer states did not have that. Our government had the foresight to create the infrastructure so that they would be the central purchaser and then start spreading it out, so there would be a lot more equitable distribution. But generally, this is not how supply chains work. In any other sector, or even in the healthcare sector, supply chains are highly distributed. There may be few manufacturers, but there are a multitude of distributors. There's a whole cold chain. There are different people that are buying it at different prices, and there are different sets of demands that you have to meet. Now, given the national emergency setup that we had earlier, it was managed centrally, and now with the logistics getting spread out, where every pharmacy in every nook and corner, it will simply follow the demand that exists. Now, definitely there is huge benefit in everyone getting vaccinated, but there is a cost as well. For someone to take a third, fourth, fifth booster 6-7 years from now, if you're in the middle of a rural village and you don't have contact with too many people, you may figure that that's not really an option for you. In which case, the local supply chain will make the calculation that their demand would only be maybe 10 or 20 vaccines per day, whereas in a large city or in a large hospital where you're dealing with huge numbers of corporate clients, we'll be buying in much larger quantities. And so our pricing will be different. It will be different in the smaller towns, but the availability will be there to match what the expectations are.
True.
We've done as much as we can right now. Now going forward, the market forces will take over.
True. Okay, Dr. Gupta, I want to come to you now and see, we are talking about a number of vaccines that are going to hit the market. Right now, we have upgraded two of the oldest in this country, but eventually there will be more players. And then there will be this question of which precautionary dose or booster dose do I take? Do I stay with the existing dose or do I go for another? Then the logistical concern that I may have been inoculated with one dose, but I may be in some other place where that dose is not available. Then what do I do? So do you feel that these things have to be ironed out before one rolls out a very, very liberalized vaccination policy?
Good evening, Sanket.
Good evening, sir.
Sanket, I think the government recommendation plus the scientific recommendation, that is recommendations by the expert committee, clearly indicates that the variation in vaccine is not acceptable. That means someone taking a Covaxin as first dose and a Covishield as a second dose. And the effectivity has not been studied yet. So we should abide by this protocol that same vaccine should be taken. And so far as the booster we talk about, which is a precautionary dose should be of the same company and same variant. Means a Covishield should be followed with a Covishield, and then a mix-up of should not be done. And when the liberalization is coming into way, the problem which will exist as you started with the program, that the two mixing should not be happening, and there should be a protocol-based characterization wherein the two things are not mixed up. So we need to very carefully watch upon the system that a person or a human being doesn't take two vaccines together. So there has to be very strict control over this. Otherwise, it will happen that there will be indirectly an exploitation of the vaccine, two people taking the different doses. So a protocol-based system, a compartmentalization has to be there. It is a must there.
Yes. Let me now come back to you, Dr. Seth. You see, we have a weird situation in this country, two extremes, where there are a few people who, and let me give you the example of Bihar. In the state of Bihar, there were pictures coming in of health workers being assaulted and people climbing on top of trees because they don't want to get vaccinated. And from the same Bihar, you had an instance where a man claimed, almost with a great sense of pride, that I have taken about 10-12 doses of vaccines. So in a situation like this, with vaccines being readily available, do you feel that there is going to be this problem as well? You'll have those crazy people who will try to get over vaccinated. How do you control that?
So, Sanket, I think the crazy people who will take so many doses are going to be rare events, and truly they are the ones who are, the ones who you hear about occasionally.
No, I'm sure there is a health concern attached to over vaccination also.
Absolutely, but I tell you where the biggest concern now is going to be. With the 72% of the adult population double vaccinated, it's usually the last leg which is the most difficult. Because in India, we don't have the vaccine antagonists. These are not the anti-vaccine activists like you see in the West. Here, there is disinformation, misinformation. There are all those other issues where people and public are still worried and misinformed, should I say. I still have, can you believe that in my outpatients, I still have people coming to me who are heart patients who actually should have got their vaccination 9 months ago, who have no reason not to get vaccinated, still asking me that should I have the vaccine? You know, I had a heart attack 2 years ago. Should I get vaccinated?
And by the way, you know, Dr. Singh, there are many people who claim that the booster doses, and this is again misinformation, that booster doses are causing heart attacks.
Correct. And therefore, we have to be, through every media, including like the way you do it yourself, every day inform more and more people. And by the way, the biggest challenges are going to lie in our rural areas. And there's no doubt that the ASHA workers and others will have to up their whole efforts to make sure that the majority of the people do get vaccinated. The last leg is the most difficult leg. But I do believe that more and more, the expert committees are always looking at these very issues. The mix and match issue, by the way, should not be put aside. It's an important issue. And by the way, it's also been demonstrated well for Covishield, which is AstraZeneca in the UK, that if you do mix it with another vaccine, and you know, a lot of people in the UK have actually got AstraZeneca, is that if you actually give perhaps a Moderna or a Pfizer, you actually get 6 times a greater antibody production. Now, the studies from India are going to be available to us in a month or two, because they also are being done in India with Covaxin and Covishield. Correct. So we'll have more data as we go along on the mix and match issue, and the expert committees are going to guide us. For the moment, we should say that we do not believe that at the moment we got any instructions to mix and match. We should follow the same vaccine booster as we had earlier. But by the way, this is going to change in the next 3 to 4, 5, 6 months, because it has been seen that mixing does increase antibody protection by more than 5 times. That's not something
which the government has considered just yet, because even
not
now,
yet. But the studies are on in India. So I would want to emphasize that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Balal, what is your, as we look at vaccines everywhere being easily available, which is how it should be, what are the concerns that come to your mind? Logistical concerns, getting people to take the vaccine, that sort of concern?
See, I think our initial concern was significant vaccine hesitancy, unavailability of vaccine, and maybe logistical issues. However, we have remarkably overcome all of that. We have plenty of vaccines. We have good infrastructure. We have personnel to do the vaccination. The logistics has been worked out. So I think now our first and primary goal should be to give the second dose of vaccine to everyone. Make sure whoever is eligible for the precautionary or the booster dose gets it. And with all these things being in place, I think this is the time to open up the market. And I do believe once there is no shortage, there is good information available, it's extremely unlikely that there will be abuse or misuse of the vaccine. It will be like another routine vaccine that we have for the children or the adults as per the guidelines laid by the expert committees and the various bodies of physicians and pediatricians. So I think it should become like that in the near future. And I do agree that though there is some data of mixing and matching vaccines seems to be beneficial, we are still awaiting data from India. Until such time, we should follow what the best part is,
if this goes through, the fact that the government is thinking of a health ID, a sort of a composite data bank of all the stuff that you do related to your body, your health, every hospital you go to, every test that you have gotten, or every vaccine that you have gotten. This will be a very, very comprehensive database, which will also help administering more and more patients when they need this booster dose or a precautionary dose, because you'll have a clear record. So that is is perhaps going to be a very, very firm backbone on which we can have this entire exercise dependent. Thank you very much for joining us. We are stopping for a short break at this moment. When we come back, some political discussion now. The Ladki Hu Lad Sakti Hu campaign of the Congress party has lost one member, the poster girl herself. Priyanka Maurya is going to join us after a short break. Stay with us. So what has happened in Uttar Pradesh is that for the Congress party, the poster girl of Ladki Hoon, Lad Sakti Hoon took this slogan very seriously, and she has now fought with the Congress because she is unhappy with the Congress and now joined the BJP. The manifesto release of the Congress party is supposed to happen tomorrow. It's a very difficult situation where the Congress will now have to or may have to quickly change the front page of their manifesto, which will have Ms. Priyanka Maurya's picture splashed all over, but she is in the BJP. What were the reasons why Priyanka's poster girl, Priyanka Maurya, had to go to the BJP? We have Ms. Maurya with us. Thank you very much for joining us, Ms. Priyanka Maurya. Good evening.
Thank you.
I want to know from you the reason. Was it just the fact that you were not given a ticket or something else?
देखिए, मैं बाय प्रोफेशन डॉक्टर हूँ और पिछले 5-6 साल से लगातार सामाजिक कार्य कर रही हूँ। तो मैं इस सोच के साथ, सिर्फ टिकट की सोच के साथ मैंने राजनीति में कदम नहीं रखा है। मैंने राजनीति में कदम रखा लोगों की मदद करने के उद्देश्य से, और इसी उद्देश्य से मैं आगे बढ़ती रही और अपने हाथ के ये जो दायरा है लोगों का मदद करने का, उसको बढ़ाने के लिए मैंने राजनीति वाला रास्ता अपनाया। लेकिन कांग्रेस पार्टी में एक बहुत विश्वास मुझे इस नाम पे था जिसको प्रियंका गांधी कहते हैं, और विश्वास किस तरीके से टूटता है कि मैं अपनी विधानसभा में जी जान से, मेहनत से लगी रही, और इनके जो रिजल्ट्स आते हैं उनमें साफ तरीके से लिखा होता है, हर जगह मेरा टॉप पे नाम, जो इनकी स्क्रीनिंग होती है वहां पे मैं टॉप पे निकलती हूँ। उसके बावजूद पहले से ही ये डिसाइडेड था कि किसको टिकट देना है, उसी को पैराशूट लैंडिंग के साथ पार्टी में उतारा जाता है, प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस करके, इसी वादे के साथ कि उसी को टिकट जाएगा। तो इसने मुझे दुख पहुंचाया, क्योंकि मैं इस विश्वास के साथ लगी हुई थी कि जो स्लोगन दिया गया है, लड़की हूं, लड़ सकती हूं, उस पर अमल करते हुए हमारे कार्य को देखा जाएगा। लेकिन कांग्रेस पार्टी कार्य को नकारते हुए, अपनी ही द्वारा बनाई हुई जो उनकी रिपोर्ट्स हैं सर्वे की, उनको नकारते हुए, पहले से जो प्री प्लान था, प्री डिसाइडेड था, जो पहुंच वाला आदमी था, जो पैसे दे सकता है, उसको टिकट। तो मेरी नाराजगी इस चीज पे है, और मैं जो लड़ाई लड़ रही हूँ वो सेल्फ रिस्पेक्ट की लड़ाई है कि किस तरीके से मेरे साथ
डॉक्टर मौर्य, मैं आपसे ये जानना चाहता हूँ कि अभी आपने थोड़ी देर पहले बोला कि आप सीट के पीछे नहीं भाग रही थी, दिस वाज नॉट अबाउट अ टिकट और अ सीट, एंड देन योर एक्सप्लेनेशन इज एवरीथिंग अबाउट दैट, कि वो मुझे टिकट नहीं दी, वो किसी और को पैरा ड्रॉप कर दिया। तो ये फिर टिकट ना मिलने के कारण ही तो हुआ।
बिल्कुल सही, क्योंकि पार्टी में ये जो प्रियंका जी ने एक स्लोगन दिया कि लड़की हो, लड़ सकती हो, तो जितनी भी महिलाएं हैं वो बढ़ चढ़ के आगे आए, क्योंकि मैं एक तरीके से रिप्रेजेंट करती हूँ, मैं लोगों की मदद करती हूँ, लोगों तक जाती हूँ। तो सबने मुझे कहा कि मुझे टिकट के लिए आवेदन करना चाहिए, और मैंने आवेदन किया। कार्य तो मैं पिछले 1 साल से लगातार।
चलिए डॉक्टर मौर्य, मेरा दूसरा सवाल आपसे ये है, यू नो, यू विल बी I won't say accused, but people will say that because you did not get a ticket here in the Congress, you have gone straight into the party which you were opposing all this while. जिस पार्टी के खिलाफ आप लड़ रही थी, आप सीधा उसी पार्टी में चली गई। ये जो पूरी बात विचारधारा की होती है, आपको उसके बारे में कुछ एहसास नहीं हुआ? क्योंकि जब आप कांग्रेस में रही होंगी, मेरे ख्याल से पूरी बातचीत ही इसी तरीके से होती होगी ना, हमें बीजेपी से लड़ना है, इस विचारधारा से लड़ना है। सो इफ टिकट के चलते वो विचारधारा कैसे बदल गई?
सिर्फ टिकट के चलते नहीं, जिस पार्टी में एक लड़की अपने हक की लड़ाई लड़ रही है, सत्य और गलत की लड़ाई लड़ रही है, फिर भी पार्टी उसके साथ नहीं खड़ी होती है, मैं कैसे बनूंगी और महिलाओं की आवाज जब मेरे ही साथ गलत होगा? किस तरीके से सिर्फ मेरे चेहरे का इस्तेमाल किया गया वोट बैंक के लिए। हमें ये बिल्कुल भी पता नहीं था कि मैनिफेस्टो में ये फोटो रिलीज होने वाला है। तो जस्ट फॉर अ वोट बैंक यू आर यूजिंग माय फेस व्हेन इट कम्स फॉर एबिलिटी, व्हेन इट कम्स फॉर परफॉर्मेंस। मेरी परफॉर्मेंस को निग्लेक्ट किया गया, मुझसे एग्जाम देने के लिए, अपियर होने के लिए कहा मैं एग्जाम में अपीयर हुई, मैंने एग्जाम दिया, टॉप के रिजल्ट्स आए, उसके बावजूद प्रमोट नहीं किया गया, तो ऑफ कोर्स मुझे इस चीज की टीस होगी और मुझे इस चीज के लिए बुरा लगेगा। और जो
No, but then okay, fine. You feel
मात्र वो बात बन के रह गया,
you feel shortchanged. Well, I understand, Dr. Maurya. You feel shortchanged कि आपने इतनी मेहनत की, इतना काम किया, लड़की हूँ, लड़ सकती हूँ, फिर एक ऐसी नौबत आ गई कि आपने अपनी पार्टी से लड़ लिया आप। लेकिन सवाल मेरा दूसरा है, अगर वहां टिकट ना मिलने की वजह से आप बीजेपी में आई हैं, तो यहां कौन सी गारंटी है कि आपको टिकट मिल जाएगी, कि है?
ऐसा है कि कांग्रेस पार्टी भी मैंने इस उपदेश से नहीं ज्वाइन किया था। मैंने आपको बताया कि मेरा जो उपदेश है, जो मेरा विजन है, वो बिल्कुल ही क्लियर है कि मुझे लोगों की मदद करनी है। इसी विजन के साथ मैं आगे बढ़ रही थी। जो मेरे लोग हैं, जो मेरे कम्युनिटी के लोग हैं, कांग्रेस पार्टी के लोग हैं, सबने कहा कि मुझे आगे बढ़ना चाहिए, टिकट के लिए आवेदन करना चाहिए, वो मैंने किया। लेकिन स्टेप वाइज जो चीजें चल रही थी, अगर मैं उसमें टॉप पे नहीं होती तो दैट्स फाइन, कि मुझे वो कह देते कि आप इस लायक नहीं है।
So you're saying that as of now you have no guarantee from the BJP, you have not been promised a ticket, is it?
पार्टी मैंने बीजेपी ज्वाइन जरूर की है, लेकिन किसी भी इस तरीके के आश्वासन के साथ नहीं। मैं जिस ध्येय से पॉलिटिक्स मैंने ज्वाइन की है, हाँ, मुझे बीजेपी से ये आश्वासन जरूर है कि हर तरीके से लोगों तक हम पहुंचेंगे और मेरे द्वारा भी लोगों की मदद की जाएगी, इसी आश्वासन के साथ, इसी ध्येय के साथ कि हम राष्ट्र हित में, समाज हित में कार्य करते रहेंगे, मैंने बीजेपी ज्वाइन की है।
मेरा आखिरी सवाल आपसे डॉक्टर मौर्य, you know, it's your face in all the campaign material of the Congress party. Now you are interestingly in the Bharatiya Janata Party and your face is there in the Congress campaign material. So what is your request going to be? I'm pretty sure that this is an uncomfortable situation for both for Priyanka Gandhi and Dr. Priyanka Maurya. कि आप यहाँ हैं, आपका कैंपेन वहां हो रहा है।
मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगी कि मेरे चेहरे का इस्तेमाल करना बंद करें, अपने दम की राजनीति करें और अपने बल पे लेकर के आए वोट्स। इस बार 2022 के चुनाव में पता चल जाएगा लोगों को कि कांग्रेस पार्टी सिर्फ एक छलावा कर रही है, दिखावा कर रही है, महिलाओं के हक की सिर्फ बात कर रही है। जहां बात आती है महिलाओं को हक देने की, वहां वो पीछे हट जाती है।
All right, I don't know whether you will get a ticket from the BJP or not, but this is a very strange and quick switch. All one can say is all the best in your new political party, Dr. Maurya. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on now to story number 3 on Left, Right and Centre. The Arunachal youth abduction case. The Indian Army has reached out to its Chinese counterpart after reports of a 17-year-old boy has gone missing near the line of actual control in Arunachal Pradesh's Upper Siang district. Let's first quickly take a look at this report.
Old Miram Tarong went missing near the border with China in a remote part of Arunachal Pradesh. The BJP's Lok Sabha MP from Arunachal Pradesh, Tapir Gaon, posted this message, tagging the Prime Minister, Home Minister and Defence Minister. He said that the Chinese army has abducted Miram of Jido village on Tuesday from inside Indian territory, Lungtajor area, where China built 3 to 4 kilometers road inside India in 2018. This is the area the MP named Shiongla area of Bishing village of Upper Siang district.
ये न्यूज़ जो है कल रात को आया था और आज सवेरे ऑलरेडी मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ डिफेंस ने अपना डिप्लोमेसी चैनल के थ्रू से इनके जरिए से वो लोग अपना ऑफिसर है वो लोग अपना बात करना शुरुआत किया है। आई एम वेरी ऑप्टिमिस्ट दैट अभी कुछ ही दिनों में जो लड़का को पकड़ा है वो जल्दी रिलीज हो जाएगी।
Army had opened up hotline with Chinese PLA to find whereabouts of the missing boy. Hotlines were also opened up last year when 5 youths from Upper Subansiri district went missing, only to be returned by China after 10 days. NDTV has learned from Army and Arunachal Pradesh government sources that the incident took place on January 18 and it was first reported back by the locals to the district administration on January 19, and now government in the state has informed center and channel of communication through Army has been opened up, information has been provided to the Chinese PLA about this missing boy. But Rahul Gandhi has tweeted, questioning Prime Minister Modi's silence. China claims all of Arunachal. This incident is the latest example of an alleged Chinese incursion into Indian territory. Both India and China have a difference in perception in terms of where the LAC actually lies. And Chinese intrusion into Arunachal Pradesh is also nothing new. But what is crucial here is the location where the incident has taken place. In 2018, in the same area, there was a standoff between the Chinese PLA and Indian Army after local Indian villagers stopped Chinese PLA and Chinese construction workers who came well inside the Indian territory to build roads there. In Guwahati, Ratnadeep Chaudhary for NDTV.
Joining us right now is Brahma Chelani, Strategic Affairs Expert, and also Lieutenant General Shaukin Chauhan, former Chairman of the Ceasefire Monitoring Group. Thank you very much. Let me begin with you first, Lieutenant General Chauhan. You know, should this be called a Chinese provocation or not? My first question.
Definitely. Good evening to you. Thank you for calling me on the NDTV. I have no doubt about it that it is a provocation. After all, this boy is an Indian citizen. And even if he's transgressed the LAC and may by mistake have transgressed the LAC, the PLA had no business to take him. And if they were taking him, definitely they should have returned him by now. The fact that the Indian Army has got in touch with the PLA at our BPM point in Arunachal is a point that we are quite clear that they've been taken. Anyway, his friend himself would come back, has reported that he's been taken away. I agree with the Chief Minister of Arunachal that probably he'll be returned as soon as possible. But this is definitely a provocation and should not have been done by the PLA.
Brahma Chelani, what's your view?
Well, this is not the first time that Chinese troops have abducted youths from Arunachal Pradesh. The fact that Chinese troops are able to cross into Indian territories and seize youths only lends support to the assertions of local people in Arunachal Pradesh and Ladakh over the years that China has been taking over their grazing lands, meter by meter, mile by mile. And the latest case of abduction, whatever you call it, and India's call for help to locate and return the missing youth, will give Beijing another chance to take a dig at India by proclaiming publicly that Arunachal Pradesh has been illegally established and that China does not recognize the existence of such a state on quote unquote Chinese territory. This is exactly what China's Foreign Ministry said in September 2020 when asked about reports that 5 local youths from Arunachal Pradesh had been kidnapped by Chinese forces. So it's clear that China is capitalizing on India's inaction to plug territorial openings. This failure, as we know, led to China's land grabs of April and May 2020.
Correct.
And has contributed to China's ongoing shadowy expansionism in the Himalayas, including creating militarized border villages and settlements. Let's be clear on one thing. The law of nature is that any vacuum will ultimately be plugged by whoever seizes the opportunity. And China is doing everything to seize any opportunity it can find.
I think that's a very, very important point. Lieutenant General Chauhan, would you concur? See, because the fact that this is being repeatedly done, should this be seen as just a case of an Indian crossing over to what China perceives as its side of, the boundary, and then a protracted negotiation? I mean, these are things that could have been done far more smoothly. It does not require this level of escalation. So do you think this is a result of perhaps some inaction or rightful action?
Well, it's actually difficult to disagree with Brahma Chelani. He is absolutely right in many ways that these are indeed provocative acts. These are indeed a Chinese attempt to change the existing status quo. But I must here take historical, issues into mind. I was a brigade commander on the line of actual control in Ladakh in 2009, and even then, when the relations between us and China were fairly even keel, they did attempt to take our youth there. They've always been very sensitive about the grazing grounds. They've always been very sensitive about their perception of the LAC. And it's something that I would say it's a work in progress. The issue about taking a harder line, as Brahma has taken in this issue, is that we don't have the force to back it at the present moment. We don't have the ability to actually, push them out till we get stronger. So till such time we get stronger and we are capable of taking offensive action against such provocative acts, till then I would say that, well,
sure.
We keep our powder dry and we keep negotiating with the PLA. After all, time is on our hands. We haven't really lost much. And we will be able to, strengthen ourselves along the line of control. Sure. It takes time. And I feel that, let's see how the PLA behaves. Let's see what they tell us tomorrow.
Okay.
Or day after, as soon as we come to know at Kibutu that whether they have this boy or not, whom they picked up from the Upper Siang district. And let's take it from there. But it's difficult to disagree with Brahma on these issues.
Right. Lieutenant General Chauhan as well as Brahma Chelani, thank you very much for joining us. Let's quickly take a look at some comments that have come in on the Coup app. Nishtha says necessary action should be taken in this regard as soon as possible. Manohar Mathur says, why are we always afraid to take action against China? I asked some of these questions of General J.J. Singh. Let's listen into this conversation. Joining us right now is General J.J. Singh, former Chief of Army Staff. He's also served as the governor in Arunachal Pradesh, has made a new political entry also. So first of all, for your political entry into the BJP, congratulations, General J.J. Singh. But while we discuss that, we are also looking at, this story in great detail of how an MP, Tapir Gao, is now claiming that a 17-year-old boy has been kidnapped in the Upper Siang district by the PLA. First of all, how do you look at this development? Because this has not happened for the first time in Arunachal Pradesh.
Sanket, I've seen these border areas because I was the governor for 5.5 years in Arunachal Pradesh. And there are very thickly forested hills. And the tribals have for centuries been, you can say, hunters and gatherers of food from the forest produces. So they go into these forests and it's their, I would say, tradition and culture to be good hunters, and they carry their dhas, they carry their bow and arrows, and they've been doing that for centuries. Now, when they have gone into this area, which is probably on our side of the line of actual control, but since there is no marking on the ground because of the mountainous terrain and the thickly forested hills, it is possible that the Chinese may have strayed into our side, or our hunters may have strayed onto the other side, because there is no boundary marked. And therefore, as the protocol which existed always, a mistake, if somebody has strayed across, even their army personnel have come across by mistake and we have returned them. So I see no reason why the Chinese would like to keep a young man of 17 years in their custody. They should hand him over as early as possible to the Indian authorities.
General Singh, the reason why I ask you this question is because I'm sure you're aware of September 2020 when the PLA had abducted, again Mr. Tapir Gao had made this claim, when 5 youth were seen missing from the Upper Subasiri district and they only released them after a week. You think this is by design? Because you see, if there is a problem here of people straying into their territory, then perhaps there has to be some sort of a mechanism to sort this out. Keeping them, holding on to them for so long, repeatedly, what does this mean?
I think the Chinese are wrong in holding an innocent civilian, and they would perhaps have done whatever interrogation they had to do about this kid, and they should return him as they have returned in the past. But I think between the two countries, whenever an incident like this has happened, it has been resolved I will tell you, there are 4 or 5 river valleys where the rivers are cutting across the Himalayas and coming from Tibet into India. From the west, you have the one which follows the Walong axis. Then there is the Subansiri. Then there is the Siang and the Lohit River. Now these are major rivers, and therefore the dispute is on understanding which spur coming down to these river valleys is the LAC. There's a little bit of a doubt there, and therefore the Chinese have perhaps created these areas as the friction points. But the McMahon line is very precise, and the maps which were made even in 1914 were quite accurate, and they know which side is their part of the McMahon line and which is India. Now, these boys have gone for a traditional, you can say, occupation. They should not be, this boy should be released as soon as possible, because there is no reason for him to be arrested and kept in their custody.
No, General Singh, I just wanted to know what is the protocol here. See, the army is now saying that they've contacted the PLA. There is a hotline or a mechanism that has been put in place to secure the release. But for this to happen over and over again, and for something which is extremely genuine, as you mentioned, there is no line. However, on record, people know where the McMahon line is. And yet, these incidents keep on happening where there is a terrible amount of time that is taken by the Chinese and a lot of negotiation which helps in securing release. Do you think this is repeated provocation? That's my question.
I think the Chinese must understand that we can do the same thing to their civilians or military people who by mistake stray into our area.
Do we
and
do
we
it?
can also hold them indefinitely. So they must know.
General Singh, do we do it?
Well, we have been very correct, and after initial questioning and interrogation, we return them back without any delay. But the Chinese must understand that we can also retaliate in the same manner if they do it.
All right, General Singh, speaking of Chinese provocation, you know, after Galwan, NDTV has accessed certain images, satellite images that show a bridge construction on the Pangong Tso lake. What will you have to say about this?
I would like to simply say that, as I have learned, this is on the Chinese side of the LAC, a line of actual control. So they can do that, but then they can't blame us for making a road on our side of the LAC and saying that we are violating the status quo. So they are violating the status quo equally. So now India is very clear that we cannot trust the Chinese, and whatever is in our national interest, we should do that. And I feel that our making the road to Daulat Beg Oldi has definitely given them jitters. They feel that we can outflank and hit their strategic highway which passes through Aksai Chin. So I am quite clear in my mind, Aksai Chin road is very vulnerable from Daulat Beg Oldi side, and we have enough forces there to do a positive retaliation in case they do any, let's put it this way, misadventure.
No, General Singh, it's that point that I wanted to come to. You see, what you're saying is, yes, the factual position. The Ministry of External Affairs has also said that this is construction in an area in the illegal occupation for the past 6 decades, 60 years. My question is, what do you do in a situation like this? They are continuing with the construction in an area that they have illegally occupied. Do we raise an objection? And if we don't raise an objection, does this show, lack of political will, or does this show fear that this is going to escalate into something which we do not want?
Sanket, my research while writing my book, The McMahon Line, has given me clear indications that the Chinese have been moving their goalpost and shifting it more and more towards our side every few years. Their 59 line, their 62 line, and now what they're talking about. So I think we have to put a stop to it, and that's what happened in Galwan. And we gave them a bloody nose, and they were shocked. we did the same thing in Doklam. We stopped them in their tracks. Now India is clear, our military is clear. We will not allow them to get away with what they did
General
in
Singh,
1960.
this is why I ask you this question. You see, to say that this construction is going on in an illegally occupied land by the Chinese is one point. But how do you raise this objection, and how and what do you do? Because if you don't do that, it seems to give us a message that perhaps, number one, there is lack of political will, or number two, we fear the consequences. What according to you is right?
You know, the mistakes we made were in the late 50s. When they were constructing this road, we should have stopped them then and there and pointed it out that it is coming into our territory. Or else we should have asked them to sit on the table and decide the boundary line. Because as I can say, the mistakes made at that time were, even though we knew the road is passing through Indian territory, somehow people in awe of Mr. Nehru's personality did not tell him the truth or try to put it under the carpet.
Okay, let me
the mistakes we made then. Now we are saying.
Let me ask you a question now that you don this hat of a political leader also. You see, the Prime Minister has come under a fair amount of criticism because of these pictures. You've got Rahul Gandhi who says that I actually fear that the Prime Minister will go ahead and inaugurate this also. The Prime Minister has also been questioned by the opposition on why has he not spoken a word on these acts of aggression by the Chinese. How would you respond?
I think our actions by the military on the ground have been on the direction of the highest political leadership, and the will to stop the Chinese in their tracks has also been given a clearance by our political leadership. So that itself, our work speaks for us, our deeds speak for us. And I think our government has taken a stance, and they said that, listen, it is illegally occupied by you, and therefore let's not raise that issue. The boundary drawn on our maps is there from 1954, and you have not objected to that, and you made a road through it. That time it was a mistake for us not to have stopped them doing it, but now we will not allow them to do anything in
but
our
that's the
part
point.
of the line
That's
of
the
actual
point,
control.
General Singh. My final question, those roads are still being constructed, and these are not roads constructed in the 50s. These are roads being constructed in 2022. These are latest satellite images.
Yes. Sanket, let me say, on their side of the line of actual control, they can construct roads because that's under their physical control. On our side, we can also do what we want to do. Now that bridge should not surprise us or should not make us get afraid. Why? Because that bridge can be undone in 5 minutes by a precision guided missile, and they know it too. So let's not say, if the situation demands, we'll be able to knock out this bridge and many other arteries which they have made, including the railways and the roads, have vulnerable points where we can disable them, we can destroy the bridges, and we can destroy those railway line which is on high pillars. So let's be clear. Unfortunately, some of our people, including political leaders, are not well briefed about it, or they have no idea about it. And some of our media also does not understand that these are not things to be afraid. If they have made a railway line, it can be disabled at any time. And we have naturally, when the balloon goes up, then there are no holds barred, and we'll take action to defend our country and our territory as well as we can.
All right, General J.J. Singh, thank you very much for your frank talk and straight talk.
You're welcome.